Okay, so welcome back to the next interview for our counselling research series. My name is Dr. Nathan Beel, and I'm interviewing on behalf of the National Heads of Counselling and Psychotherapy Education. And I'd like to welcome Susan de Campo, and we go back quite a number of years, back to the former Queensland Counselling Association days, and also for the last few years we've been academic colleagues at the University of Southern Queensland. So I'd just like to welcome you, Susan, and wondering if you'd like to introduce some of your professional background for the viewers.
Sure. Thank you for the invitation to participate in um, this video. My official title, I suppose, is a clinical counsellor, registered clinical counsellor. And my background is a little bit varied, a bit of teaching. I was a registered nurse for a long time, and I've been a counsellor since the early 90s. Um, and in that time, I suppose I've ended up specialising to some extent, although I'd call myself a generalist, specialising in family law work. I sort of fell into doing things like court-ordered counselling, reportable family counselling, and that then has eventually um, led into doing my doctorate in some of that work. And so currently I'm in private practice. I also operate, although I don't manage it, a children's supervised contact service. I provide clinical supervision to I have a number of supervisees, and I'm studying.
Wow, that sounds like you've got a lot on your plate and a very rich history, very rich professional history, and quite a specialist area too in your area of specialisation. And I'm just curious because you've got obviously a very successful private practice. You often teach on the side, and you do a lot of supervision as well in your work. What sort of prompted you to consider undertaking a PhD on
Mm.
top of all of that?
Yeah. So I've been teaching at various universities since about 2003. Um, so I am really kind of very committed to the idea of evidence-based practice. And so alongside of that is, of course, the research component. And a little while back, but I'd never, even though I love teaching and I love a lot of aspects of academia, I'd never kind of thought of myself as a researcher. So it was a bit of a kind of an identity thing, I think. And then a little while ago, one of my colleagues said that there was a particular program, doctoral program, that sort of was really designed for people who had particular expertise in their field, and that you could do research based on your professional expertise as the kind of underpinning concept. And so when I explored that further, um, it really just was the perfect fit for me because it meant that what I was researching was what I knew best, and so I was very, very supported in the and have been very, very supported in the research side of things, but there's a big recognition of the value of my professional knowledge.
Right. And so was your one of the key motivating factors that here was something which was going to enable you to get that recognition for what you already know, or was it around, I've got a problem to solve in my current context, and I really, and I just would like to carve out time and get the support to actually solve a research question in my area?
Actually, both.
Okay.
So, and what has since transpired for me as I've been progressing along the journey is a really kind of more focused idea of what I want to actually do once I've completed this piece of research, and how I want to use it in an educational way and educate others in. But there has been a huge gap, certainly in Australia, in the area that I'm researching.
Yeah, excellent. So you're doing a professional doctorate, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
So and that's sort of got the structure which is more around the, I guess, the doctorate for practitioners rather than
Yes.
just sort of hardcore researchers. It's people who are practitioners who can
Absolutely.
try to
Not
figure
to,
out what they.
yes. And they're very, and the program has been organised to be very, shall I say, gentle in
Mhm.
terms of equipping us with the research side of things. So there is an expectation that the research will be very robust,
Mm.
and but again, it is informed by the professional expertise in a particular area. Um, but they don't. They're very, yeah, as I say, very robust in terms of what the expectation around the research is.
Yeah, excellent. So just curious as to what your topic is
Mm.
and yeah, what your research is about.
Okay, so it's reunification therapy in the Australian family law system.
Mhm.
So very often after there's been a parental absence, whether following separation, whether parties of the parents have lived a long way apart, or there's been a parent that's been alienated um, by the other parent. There's been a gap of time before since a child has seen a particular parent, and those parents then head off to court, and a judge will make an order for reunification therapy. They actually have no idea what they're ordering, but it's this is a phrase, a concept that um, is talked about and court ordered all the time,
Mm.
um, and it's a very particular type of therapy. So there are some really clear differences between what we would consider kind of regular counselling or any of the modalities of, sort of the key modalities that we might use in counselling.
Mm.
But then on top of that, there's things like reunification therapy has a number of stakeholders involved. It may not be it's probably not voluntary. There's a significant cost involved. There are a number of stakeholders that have all their 2 cents worth, most of whom don't know again what the therapist is actually doing.
Mm.
So the knowledge base for the therapist is very different, or broader, I should say. So there's that kind of nexus between family law um, and family therapy, I guess, in some sort of post-separation family therapy.
Mm.
And in Australia in particular, there is a huge gap. There is no research essentially in
Mm.
Australia about this um, type of therapy. Um, there is research about reunification in the child protection arena, but in that context, kids have typically kept seeing their parent, whereas
Okay.
in the family law area, I do reunifications where kids haven't seen their parents for 3 years.
Mm.
Um, and so as I said, there's no research in Australia about that. There's no accountability for the therapist doing it. There's no specific training for people who do it. So we've all those of us that do it have kind of just developed our own
Okay, so there's
models,
no
our own.
model, no structure
There is
writing
no
on it.
model to be
Wow.
used.
Yeah.
And in fact, some of the expectations around what a reunification therapy in Australia should do in overseas international research is contraindicated. So, for example, one of the main models that's used in the US
Mm.
is very clear that reunification should not be undertaken in where there's untested allegations of family violence.
Mm.
And that's the very circumstances that it's court ordered here in Australia.
Right.
So you
Wow.
have people like myself, being told there's been allegations of family violence against this particular person, and now, Susan, we'd like you to engage in this therapeutic process that reunites the child with the parent. So, and I think all those, and that's quite that is ethically difficult for me, and so I'm hoping that my research will speak to some of those things.
Yeah. And so what's your goal? Are you creating a framework for it, or is it what are you
So I'm
hoping to achieve?
Yeah. So because each family and each case is very, very different,
Mm,
what I'm hoping to be able to articulate are common factors affecting outcomes.
mhm.
Right. So we know the common factors model in counselling, more in therapy, more, in that context. But I think that there's my view, I'm hoping, my hypothesis is that there's going to be common factors affecting outcomes in reunification therapy. So they'll be, um, uh, and then if we can identify the factors that are more likely that will result in a positive outcome,
Mm.
then people will know that. And factors that are likely to impede the successful outcome.
So is it
So
like
I'm
what
hoping
works or what doesn't work
yes,
in this
yes,
space, and maybe
yes,
principles that
yes,
therapists can apply or shouldn't apply?
yeah. It should apply,
Should apply.
should apply, yes.
Yeah, excellent. Wow, sounds like exciting and sounds, yeah, quite potentially groundbreaking, like that real sort of,
I feel like it is.
yeah. And you're probably the best to know because I imagine you've got your head around the research, what's there. You've probably done your literature searches and
Yes.
sort of have
So
a,
currently have a scoping review submitted for publication.
Mhm.
Um, Seems that journals are rarely in a rush to get back to the people who
That's a good
submit.
sign, Susan. If you've submitted it and you haven't got a fast turnaround, normally a fast turnaround is what we call a desk reject. So it means so they've
Okay.
probably sent it out to the reviewers, and that's where it's probably stalled at the moment.
It's interesting. Yeah, one of the papers that made it to the scoping review
Mhm.
by the skin of its teeth. One of the authors of that is actually one of the reviewers.
Okay. Yes. That's also interesting too, given the small area of existing research, then it makes sense that there might be one or two of the authors actually in
Yes,
the team. So um,
yes.
although it's supposed to be anonymous as well. So
Oh,
um,
okay.
yeah. So look, so that sounds like I'm getting the impression you're doing PhD by public or
Yes,
doctorate by publication.
yes.
So with the professional doctorate, how many publications are you required to submit? Um, as
I
part
th- so so the next phase of my research is interviewing other people who do reunification therapy, and I'm partway through that process, which I hope to have finished by the end of this month.
Okay.
Then the next phase is to do a survey, and I think I'll end up publishing or writing a paper about that phase.
Mhm.
Then the next phase of the research is to do a survey of um, the about 1,000 members in Queensland of the Family Law Professionals Association,
Mhm.
um, and just to find out what they all know and think about reunification therapy. And I think then I will be publishing kind of um, that, and whether that fits with what I find out from the reunification therapist. So potentially three, and then maybe, yeah,
Yeah. Wow. So that almost sounds like the size of a PhD, which
yes,
in terms of the number of projects undertaken to do this.
very, very much so.
Yeah. Okay. So you've done your confirmation of candidature,
Yes.
and what was that experience like for you?
Um, well, again, it's fascinating it's actually fascinating presenting something to people where you're the only one that really knows about it. um, so I feel reasonably comfortable presenting. I think, having taught for a long time, um, I don't really have much of a problem sort of speaking to people. I was really nervous though. I was nervous, and I think that's probably reasonable.
Yeah.
Everyone was very kind and very lovely, and asked me a few questions that I didn't really know the answers to, but that was okay. They were, it was just, for me, it was a pretty positive experience actually.
Yeah.
Um, and I enjoyed it. And, I quite like when there's, there's something that I haven't known, I don't know about,
Absolutely.
and then I'll go away and then I'll find out,
Yeah.
So that's, that's what I expect my students to do.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
so I think if I'm asking students to do that, then that's what I need to be doing.
Yeah, and it certainly saves you paying down the track. If you've got blind spots that you haven't picked up, and it's right at the beginning when you're starting to when you're conceptualizing your project, and if there's some blind spots there, you want to find out now rather than halfway down the track and having to go back and undo stuff. So,
Absolutely. I found the ethics approval process quite arduous.
mm,
And, you know, I'm sure that decades ago, it was like, oh, well, this bit of research isn't going to hurt anyone. All good to
yeah,
go. Sign here. But now it's just like, wow, there's a lot of stuff you have to cover off
oh
on.
yeah. Yeah, I've certainly seen them change over the last 10 years or so, where they've just become
Yeah.
more and more arduous. So yeah, hopefully the arduousness increases the level of protection for the consumers and that well, participants of the research. But yeah.
And I'm very pleased that my research is low risk.
Mm.
So I think that's that's something that's lovely about doing research in therapy. If it's in a lot of ways probably low risk.
Yeah, certainly when you're dealing with the populate, like the participants you're dealing with other therapists, legal practitioners. I think if you started to research the clients and the children, then that would
Yeah.
be, you'd probably be going through a few more ringers.
Absolutely, absolutely, Nathan. And of course, that idea has come into my mind, but I need to just stay in my lane here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the thing about PhD or doctoral research is where you don't need to research everything or every group which is linked with yours. It's really giving you the apprenticeship of how to do research. So you do those two groups, but then afterward you might think, well, does this actually work? And let's hear the client voice in this and hear what their perspectives are. And then so it's
Yeah.
doctoral studies are often we see them as the top of education, but it's actually the beginning of a research
Yes.
career in some ways.
And I've really, something that I suppose I've been pleasantly surprised by is that when you're doing research and there's these processes and um, uh, formal procedures that you need to go through, really it's not, it ends up being not as anywhere near as daunting as what you first think. So for example, my supervisor said, oh, Susan, you need to do your interview protocol. What's the interview protocol? And then he sent me some examples, and I was like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah. So these sort of words can be quite scary sounding words and like, oh, these sound really, but then when you actually get into it, it's like, actually, this is sort of, I already
Know
got this
how
sort
to
of
do
knowledge.
this.
Yeah, this is easy. Yeah,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
yeah.
for
Which,
sure.
and again, that's really that's been reassuring for me as someone that didn't see myself as a researcher, that I've been able to be a researcher.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like this research doctoral thing's got this mystique about it, that it's like it's only for these people up here. That's all they do. But actually, it's not as mystiquey once you get into it.
Well, it actually isn't. I got in touch with an old colleague just recently to ask her for some names of people, and I said something about doing this research. She goes, "Oh, I take my hat off to you." I thought, "Oh no, I don't think you need to."
So I guess that was my next question, Susan, is really around, you are a really good example of someone who's been a long-term practitioner
Mm.
and now entering into the research
Yeah,
phase of your
yeah,
career,
yeah,
into the research world. And, you've been as an academic in teaching into primarily
yeah,
teaching only roles, but now you're going into this research
yeah.
focused role. I'm just wondering what are some of the key benefits that you see for research for academic or for practitioners who are working in the field? What sort of benefits do you think um, a research journey or a doctoral journey might bring them?
Um, well, one of the things for me has been that um, in my sort of uh, senior next 15 years of work, doing this doctorate will give me a platform for the next sort of thing that I'm passionate about and want to do, which is um, create a postgraduate um, degree of some sort in therapeutic family law. There's a huge gap there. So for me, that's, it's important that I have the proper credentials, the not what's the a better word than proper, that I have the credibility, the academic credibility to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Um, I I think it's been good for me to have research a bit demystified. So in terms of, I've always really, really enjoyed studying and learning, and I, really enjoy writing papers and so forth. And when I prepare family reports for the court, they're 10,000 word documents that I sort of write on a very regular basis. Um, so for me, then getting actually into the research from a participation perspective, it's good that it's been a bit demystified.
Mhm.
Um, I um, I also have probably a deeper appreciation for research, for what it takes to have things published, papers published, and research published. Um, and it, if it wasn't already important enough, I think the importance of having uh, evidence-based practice for, when people are out there doing things that are not evidence-based, I sort of think, it's really critical to have that research there. And I do tend to be a bit of a put your money where your mouth is sort of person.
Mhm.
So if I'm, you know, banging on about, people need to be doing, evidence-based work, well, then if there's no evidence base, then Susan, off you go.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So rather than just recognize there's a need out there, it's like, well, maybe I can actually be someone who actually addresses that need. And it
Yeah,
sounds like you're
yeah,
doing that. Um,
yeah. And I wouldn't have done that, I think, unless there was this particular program, So for me, that was the thing that just made, and the enthusiasm and support of the academics that I've been involved with on the journey, who've just been, just amazing and lovely and so forth. And that's something that I like to do, with people that I'm mentoring across across the board. So I've really valued that, and I look forward to perhaps doing that for others, down the track.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're sort of saying the importance of good supervisors, committed supervisors has been a key thing for you. And I'm
Absolutely.
curious because you're talking about this new area that's sort of like you're trailblazing in.
Yeah.
How did you select your supervisors? Because I suspect they probably don't have expertise, or maybe they do, in your particular
No,
area.
no, they don't. So, um, um, so my primary supervisor is the head of the program.
Mm,
So, and he was really captured by some of the case studies, really, that I've shared with him along the way, and he was really happy to then become my lead supervisor. And the other two, one of them has some knowledge of family law um, processes and procedures and dynamics.
mhm.
She's an experienced counsellor as well, and the other one is is learning and enthusiastically so. But she's good with research. She's a researcher, and I can't even remember what her PhD was in now. But so there, you know, the thing is that I don't really need support with the topic, if you like. I need the support with the research and how to do that, and then pull it all together. And that's what they've been awesome at doing.
Yeah. So really the methodologies that help and the
Yeah.
guidance on how to do research
Yeah.
is where they come through. And really, so in some ways they rely on you, on your rigor, on your dedication to make sure that you're getting across what research does and currently exists
Yes.
and putting it
Yes.
together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you've talked about some of the enablers of what's helped you to get to where you are in the process. What might some of the barriers that you've encountered that you've had to work through?
Um, I think if I'd had to pay for it, I wouldn't have been. I wouldn't have been as I perhaps wouldn't have done it. I might have.
So this is government funded. This is a government funded
Well,
one, or
but
is it?
it's funded from somewhere.
Yeah,
I haven't had
yeah,
to pay anything.
yeah. I think this is the research, the government Commonwealth government research funding scheme. So this
Okay.
is what it is.
Thanks, Albo. Um,
Yeah.
um, barriers. Um, Again, I'm lucky that I'm in private practice, because I call the shots in terms of my working hours and so forth. So I think if that would have been that might have been another barrier for me. If I'd had, all my children are adults, so I didn't have to worry about. It's only my grandkids that I've had to worry about in terms of time management.
Yeah.
Um, so I've had, family support, financial support, the workplace support. If those things hadn't been in place for me, I think it would have been difficult. Um, the I suppose I think one of the barriers has, or not barriers, but one of the challenges has been that it's a very niche area. So the knowledge, um, the knowledge base there is perhaps been a bit of a challenge, um, and I've found that having to explain a lot of the stuff has sometimes been necessary
Sure.
and time consuming kind of thing.
Sure.
Um, what else? My probably okay. A challenge for me is my own attitude sometimes.
Mhm.
So at the beginning of last year, I don't know, the year's gone, hasn't it? I published. I wrote what I thought was a scoping review. That wasn't actually, it was last year. What I thought was a scoping review, but it wasn't the correct format. And when I sent it into my supervisor, he was just like, "This isn't the correct format for a scoping review." And I felt like, oh, I didn't know that, and so then I kind of got a bit deflated, and so I sort of dropped the ball for a little while there. And it wasn't until one of my supervisees actually had a scoping review published in a counselling journal. And I said to her, "Right, I need you to just help me with this." And so that sort of got my motivation back when I felt like I got back on track. So I think that's one of the challenges, is staying on track and staying, like at the moment, I'm in the middle of sort of the interviews, and but you have to sort of stay enthusiastic, like while every day you're not hearing back from a journal, or when someone who said they would do an interview says, "Oh no, I don't think I can be bothered now." And so that's keeping your spirits up in the face of that, I think, is something that is potentially tricky.
Absolutely. So it's that sort of, how do we stay motivated when we're getting these hits, these knocks, these disappointments, and sometimes it can be real punches in the gut, in the publishing, when you do get negative feedback from the supervisor, how to get yourself up, wipe yourself off, and it can be really, really tricky, that whole, just the emotional journey of the doctoral journey.
Yes. Yeah. And I already, I'm hoping to be finished next year,
Okay. Wow.
and by the end of next year, I'm really hoping.
Mhm.
Um, and already I'm thinking, like, hurry up.
Sure. Yeah. 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 So when you see the finish line, and it can feel really close, but then also really far away as well at the same time,
Mm.
because of all the extra, packaging it into the thesis itself, and the copies and all that. So yeah.
I regularly visualize my graduation ceremony with my floppy
Okay.
hat.
Yeah.
I think, I sort of imagine what I'm going to wear under the gown. Like, I do all
Wow.
that sort of stuff to keep myself motivated. Um, uh, and I think, whatever works, kind of thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No, these little sort of hacks that you've got to try and stay motivated sound like they're probably really useful. And probably the last question I've got is really around, what advice might you have for either um, people out there, practitioners out there who might be considering research, or might be students who are undertaking it, or academics, or the profession, or
Yeah.
institutions, any of those sort of target group that you think, I've got some messages for them that might be potentially useful.
Like, it's really worth giving it a crack.
Mhm.
Like, I think it is um, intellectually rewarding. I think contributing to this profession is really important. I love um, the idea of sort of leaving something better than when I found it. So that's, what I think about the counselling profession. To contribute is really important.
Mhm.
Um, it's not as daunting as what you might imagine, and I feel like there's, especially these days, it's very different to the 90s, but especially these days, there's a lot of support out there. And um, so I reckon give it a crack. It's it's great.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so it sounds like your experience so far is the benefits outweigh the costs.
Oh, 1,000,000%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I still am insanely passionate about it all. But, the stuff I'm passionate about, I'm very passionate about. The stuff that I'm not, I'm very not.
Yeah. Also, one other question. On average, how much time do you spend a week on these studies, if you could average?
Yeah, it really depends. So some weeks I've spent, 15 hours. Some weeks I've spent 5. Some weeks I've spent, 20 hours kind of thing. So, and some weeks I've spent none.
Yeah.
So it really, I am lucky that luck spelt WORK, that I read pretty quickly and write pretty quickly. That comes from, you know, decades of writing very long reports. So I'm lucky that I can get things done quick, in a timely manner. Um, and I'm also lucky that over the years, the reading that I've had to do for my doctorate is reading that I've done for the last 25 years.
Okay, yeah. Wow,
Right.
nice.
So that saves you a lot when you're someone that regularly reads the research, and because of teaching, I've had to keep up with a lot of that stuff. So I know what the more recent papers on common factors say. So that's then all knowledge that I haven't had to do
Mm.
for this particular piece of research that I'm doing now.
Yeah.
um, so I think you know and a lot of this stuff hasn't been hard to understand, so I haven't had to spend hours wading through difficult material.
Mhm.
So in summary, it really varies, but
Yeah.
it hasn't. I still work kind of full time. I still have time off and look after grandkids and you know, watch rubbish TV occasionally. So,
It hasn't taken over your whole life. It's just
no,
you can have
not
it
at all.
slotted in as needed. And
Yeah.
just also another question is around your, you're in this doctoral program now. What prior research training did you have prior to? Um,
Okay. So
yeah.
let me see. What's less than zero?
Really?
Yeah. So
Is it, haven't you
in
done a couple
my
of masters?
no, so in my counselling degree, arts degree, my master's, there was no there the and so I started a PhD, oh, a long time ago. Or was that a doctor of social science? I think I started many, many, many years ago, and I did a very small ethics research project with
Mm.
that. But when I look back now, compared to what I'm doing, was not even proper research. So my exposure to research has been having supervisees do research, being interviewed for various researchers, and probably the main exposure I had was when my youngest daughter did her Master of Counselling, and she did a research project, and so I sort of sticky beaked over her shoulder through that research journey.
Mhm.
Um, Other than that,
Wow. And when you say you supervise people who are doing research, that was supervised in clinical supervision
supervise, yeah,
rather than
sorry,
research supervision.
supervise, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
people, some of my counselling supervisees who are doing different bits of research.
Yeah. Okay. Because I'm aware that a lot of places, a lot of counselling master's degrees have been sort of trimming back on their research because their curriculums are getting full with other practice, and obviously practice is really important. But so it's nice to hear that you didn't have that research background as such, but you're still able to do this. And was there research methodology training as part of your program that you're undertaking now, or is the training essentially your research supervisors guiding you along the way?
That plus I had no, so there was no training,
Mhm.
um, but I was. one of those people that, in the early parts of the program where they, said, read these 3 articles, I did, and, watch these 5 videos on this, I did. So I knew that I was lacking in that area. So um, I had I did it in my master's. I did do a unit course on epidemiology and another one on qualitative research methods. So I'd studied it, studied that, but yeah, in terms of doing any myself, novice.
Sure. Yeah, and I guess that one of the best ways to learn research is by doing it. So it's there is a gap between learning about it versus actually conducting it, and it sounds like that's where it's
Yeah.
had the most value. Okay, look, we might bring it to a close. So just I guess final question is, do you have anything else you'd like to add that we haven't discussed yet?
No, I think if anyone's watching this and wants to know anything else, I'm happy to be contacted. And I think what you're doing is a really cool idea.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Susan. So what we might do is we might get your website address or your email address so we can put it in the comment section or the description section of the YouTube clip. And look, I think that this interview has been really valuable for particularly practitioners who might be considering changing direction or adding value to what they already do, and or maybe moving their career in a different direction to where they've currently done it. But it sounds like from you being an active full-time practitioner who's got that flexibility to be able to adjust the schedule as needed, you're saying you're getting lots of value out of just the journey of the
Very
doctoral
much so.
journey.
Very, very much so.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you once again for this conversation, and all the best with finishing your doctoral program.
Thank you.
Okay.